In a stunning move that has sent shockwaves through the automotive industry and beyond, the United States government has officially announced that all automakers operating within the country must transition to producing only electric vehicles. The mandate, which will gradually phase out gasoline-powered cars entirely, marks one of the most ambitious regulatory shifts in modern history and sets the stage for a radical transformation of how Americans drive, travel, and consume energy. The decision was not made lightly, but it has been justified by the government as an urgent necessity to combat climate change, reduce dependence on foreign oil, and push the country into the forefront of clean energy innovation. While whispers of such a move have circulated for years, few truly believed it would ever become law, particularly given the immense power of oil interests, the complexities of the automotive supply chain, and the cultural importance of gasoline-fueled vehicles. Now, what once seemed like speculation has become reality. The announcement immediately divided opinion across the country. Environmental advocates, climate scientists, and clean energy entrepreneurs hailed it as a historic turning point, one that could finally align U.S. policy with the global push toward sustainability. They argue that electrification is long overdue and that the nation has lagged behind Europe and parts of Asia in committing to a post-gasoline future. For them, the mandate represents not just a legal requirement, but a symbolic declaration that the age of fossil fuels is rapidly closing. On the other side, critics of the decision see it as government overreach of the highest order. They argue that forcing automakers into an all-electric future disrupts consumer choice, risks destabilizing the economy, and ignores the practical challenges of infrastructure and energy production. Millions of Americans live in areas with limited charging networks, and many households cannot afford the upfront cost of electric vehicles, even if long-term savings are promised. Small businesses in rural communities, which depend heavily on affordable and rugged gasoline vehicles, fear they will be left behind in this sweeping transition. The auto industry itself faces a daunting task. Major players such as Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis had already begun ambitious electrification strategies, investing billions into new plants, battery research, and EV lineups. Tesla, of course, stands as a pioneer, but even it will be affected by the new regulations, as the standards for efficiency and accessibility are expected to tighten. Traditional automakers now must accelerate timelines dramatically, effectively rewriting decades of manufacturing systems, supply chains, and dealership models in just a few years. For companies that have relied on gasoline-powered trucks and SUVs as their profit engines, the government's order represents both an existential threat and an unprecedented opportunity. Beyond the companies themselves, the broader supply chain faces upheaval. The automotive sector is deeply interconnected, employing millions across manufacturing, parts suppliers, dealerships, repair shops, and fuel distribution. A sudden mandatory pivot to electric vehicles means that jobs tied to internal combustion engines, whether building transmissions, fabricating exhaust systems, or maintaining gas stations, are suddenly endangered. At the same time, new jobs will undoubtedly be created in battery production, software development, and charging infrastructure. But the speed of this disruption raises questions. Can the workforce adapt quickly enough? And can communities dependent on traditional auto jobs avoid being hollowed out in the process? Infrastructure represents another enormous hurdle. Electric vehicles depend on widespread, reliable charging networks, and while progress has been made, the United States remains far from ready to handle a complete shift away from gasoline. Urban areas may adapt more easily, with their dense populations and existing utilities, but rural America could face severe challenges. Long-haul truckers, farmers, and suburban commuters are all asking how charging stations, grid capacity, and vehicle range will keep up with demand. The government insists it has a plan to rapidly expand the charging network, but skeptics fear that the reality of building such infrastructure on time will be far more difficult than the rhetoric suggests. Then there is the question of energy itself. While electric vehicles reduce tailpipe emissions to zero, they rely on electricity generated somewhere else. At present, much of the U.S. grid is still powered by natural gas and coal, meaning the carbon footprint of EVs depends heavily on where and how they are charged. Advocates argue that as renewable energy grows, the environmental benefits of EVs will compound dramatically. Critics counter that without simultaneous investment in clean energy generation, the electrification mandate may simply shift emissions from the road to the power plant. Consumer response will also play a crucial role in determining whether this mandate succeeds or fails. Car buyers are notoriously price-sensitive, and electric vehicles, despite falling costs, remain more expensive on average than their gasoline counterparts. While federal and state incentives exist to soften the financial blow, questions remain about whether middle-class families can truly embrace EVs at the scale required. Range anxiety, charging times, and battery longevity are other concerns that have not yet been fully erased from the minds of consumers. For many, the automobile is not just transportation, but a deeply personal purchase tied to lifestyle, culture, and identity. Convincing truck enthusiasts, sports car lovers, and rural drivers to give up gasoline will require not just government mandates, but products that inspire genuine excitement. Internationally, this move will reverberate far beyond America's borders. Automakers that sell in the U.S. will now have to align their global strategies with the new rules, potentially accelerating electrification worldwide. At the same time, nations that supply critical minerals for batteries, such as lithium, cobalt, and nickel, stand to gain enormous influence over the future of transportation. Geopolitics may shift as the race to secure battery supply chains becomes just as important as oil pipelines once were. This raises questions about whether the U.S. is prepared to handle a new era of resource competition, particularly with rivals like China already years ahead in battery production. Despite the challenges, the government insists this is not only possible, but essential. Officials argue that waiting any longer would lock in decades of further emissions and squander the chance to lead in one of the most important industries of the 21st century. They frame the mandate as both an environmental necessity and an economic opportunity, a chance to create millions of green jobs, reduce healthcare costs tied to pollution, and end the cycle of oil dependency that has shaped U.S. foreign policy for generations. Yet no matter how it is framed, the transition will not be smooth. For every new EV plant that opens, there will be a shuttered factory that once built engines. For every new charging station installed, there will be a gas station struggling to survive. For every driver eager to adopt the latest EV, there will be another reluctant to give up the roar of a gasoline engine. Change on this scale is messy, uneven, and deeply disruptive. What cannot be denied, however, is that the U.S. automotive landscape has entered a new chapter. For more than a century, the internal combustion engine defined not only the car, but the culture of America itself. Road trips, muscle cars, pickup trucks, and the very idea of the open road are tied to the smell of gasoline and the sound of pistons firing. Now that chapter is closing. Whether the electric future will capture the same imagination remains to be seen. But history will remember this moment as the point where the government declared, with finality, that the age of gasoline was over. The road ahead is filled with uncertainty. Automakers must reimagine themselves from the ground up. Consumers must adapt to new habits, new technologies, and new costs. Infrastructure must be built at a pace that feels almost impossible. But revolutions are never easy, and this is nothing short of a revolution. The U.S. government has forced the hand of an industry that for too long moved at its own pace. Now the pace has been set by law and the race to an electric future has officially begun. If you want to stay updated on groundbreaking stories like this and follow the twists and turns of this historic transition, make sure to subscribe to our channel today. The future of transportation is unfolding before our eyes. Don't miss a moment of it.